For centuries, the Ottoman Empire, a vast and sprawling domain, held together a diverse region acting as a bridge between East and West. Its influence stretched across continents, shaping the lives and destinies of countless people, uniting Arabs, who brought their rich culture and traditions to the empire, Kurds, with their distinct heritage and mountainous homelands, Turks, Armenians and Jews, each contributing to the empire's vibrant tapestry of cultures and religions under a single authority, centered in the magnificent city of Constantinople. Its rule was imperfect, marked by periods of both prosperity and oppression, but it provided a fragile order, a semblance of stability in a turbulent world. Then came World War I, a cataclysmic event that would shatter the foundations of the old order. The Ottomans, siding with the losing Central Powers, lost. Their empire collapsed, crumbling under the weight of war and internal strife, and the region, once firmly under Ottoman control, was left exposed, vulnerable to the ambitions of outside powers. The end of the empire in 1922 marked a definitive turning point in Middle Eastern history, shattered generations of certainty, leaving behind a legacy of displacement and disillusionment, and opened a dangerous power vacuum, inviting instability and conflict. Into this void stepped new masters, eager to assert their influence and control. Britain and France, the dominant colonial powers of the time, who saw the region as a chessboard, a strategic prize to be divided and manipulated, not a complex society with its own intricate history, culture and aspirations. The chaos that defines the modern Middle East, with its ongoing conflicts and deep-seated divisions, was born in this moment of imperial collapse and foreign intervention. Secret agreements, negotiated behind closed doors, and public betrayals after World War I, fueled resentment and mistrust, set the stage for decades of turmoil, instability and conflict that continue to plague the region today. Promises made to Arab leaders who had hoped for independence and self-determination were broken, and the dream of a unified Arab state, a powerful symbol of Arab nationalism, was dismissed, replaced by a patchwork of artificial states. Instead, foreign diplomats, with little understanding of the region's complexities, drew new borders, with little regard for the people living there, dividing communities and creating new sources of tension. This act of creation was also an act of violence, a disregard for the existing social fabric, imposing new realities that clashed with local aspirations, leading to resentment and resistance. Peoples were forced to live within borders they never chose, often separated from their families and communities under rulers they never wanted, imposed by foreign powers with their own agendas. The fall of the Ottoman Empire was not just an end of an era, it was a violent beginning, the start of a new chapter marked by conflict and instability. Colonial occupation, with its inherent power imbalances, nationalist resistance, fueled by a desire for self-determination, and superpower rivalries as Britain and France vied for influence, ignited fires that still burn today, casting a long shadow over the region. The chaos was not inevitable, it was not a natural occurrence. It was manufactured in European halls of power, in the boardrooms and diplomatic meetings where the fate of the Middle East was decided, and on the sands of the Arab world where the consequences of those decisions continue to unfold. The old world was gone, swept away by the tides of war and imperial ambition, replaced by uncertainty and conflict, a new era of instability and division. The seeds of today's turmoil, the roots of the conflicts that continue to shape the Middle East, were sown in the ruins of empire, in the aftermath of a world war that redrew the map and reshaped the destiny of a region. The fate of the Arab lands, their very future, was being decided thousands of miles away in Europe. Not in the heart of the Middle East itself, where these communities thrived. In 1916, amidst the turmoil of World War I, Britain and France secretly agreed to divide the Ottoman Arab provinces amongst themselves. This was the infamous Sykes-Picot Agreement, a deal struck behind closed doors. This pact callously ignored the intricate tapestry of the people, their deep-rooted histories, and the established communities that had existed for centuries. They were treating the region as a blank slate, ready to be carved up and reshaped according to European interests. After the war's devastation, these secret plans, once whispered in corridors of power, became official policy, solidifying the colonial agenda. The newly formed League of Nations, intended to promote peace, instead granted Britain and France mandates to rule over these Arab territories. France asserted its control over Syria and Lebanon, while Britain took control of Palestine, Transjordan, and the oil-rich provinces that would eventually become Iraq. These new borders were entirely artificial, imposed from afar with little regard for the existing realities on the ground. They were slicing through communities, dividing families, and disrupting centuries-old ways of life that had evolved organically over generations. In Palestine, Britain's mandate included the infamous Balfour Declaration, promising a Jewish homeland in a land already inhabited by a predominantly Arab population. This decision was setting the stage for future conflict and decades of unrest. The newly created states lacked both internal cohesion and any real sense of legitimacy in the eyes of the people. They were governed by rulers installed and supported by the very colonial powers that had carved up the region. These arbitrarily drawn borders quickly became potent symbols of foreign domination and the painful reality of Arab disunity. The ongoing struggle to either erase or come to terms with these imposed lines would profoundly define the region's turbulent politics for generations to come. The countless wars, revolutions, and seemingly endless cycles of violence can all trace their roots back to these fateful colonial decisions made over a century ago. The persistent chaos and instability that plague the modern Middle East are, in many ways, a direct consequence of these lines drawn in the sand by foreign powers. The legacy of the Sykes-Picot Agreement continues to haunt the region, a constant reminder of a past that refuses to stay buried. The story of Iraq begins with its very creation. Iraq, as we know it today, was a colonial invention, a construct of external powers. It was cobbled together rather hastily from 3 distinct Ottoman provinces, each with its own unique character and history. These provinces had very little in common, fostering a sense of disunity from the outset. Basra in the south was predominantly Shia Arab. Baghdad, the heart of the region, presented a more complex Sunni-Shia mix. And Mosul in the north was largely dominated by Kurds and other minority groups. To govern this disparate land, the British installed Faisal, a Hashemite outsider with limited ties to the local population, as king. Even before the monarchy was firmly established, Iraqis revolted against foreign rule in 1920. This uprising saw a rare moment of unity, uniting Shia, Sunni, and former Ottoman officers in a shared desire to end British rule. However, the British responded swiftly and brutally, crushing the revolt with overwhelming force. They resorted to using air power, indiscriminately bombing villages to quell the unrest. This heavy-handed response set a pattern: governance by coercion and force, rather than through genuine consent of the governed. The monarchy under Faisal heavily relied on a Sunni elite, systematically excluding the Shia majority and the Kurdish population from meaningful participation in power. As a result, Iraq's government often felt alien and detached from the people it was supposed to represent. It was perceived as primarily serving foreign interests and the ambitions of a narrow, privileged clique. Consequently, the state struggled to foster a unifying national identity, and its legitimacy in the eyes of many Iraqis was always in question. In this environment, power was often seized by force rather than earned through genuine popular support and democratic processes. This unstable foundation inevitably led to a series of coups, the rise of dictatorships, and devastating cycles of sectarian violence. The pervasive chaos that later engulfed Iraq was not a sudden event, but rather a slow explosion, with the fuse lit by ill-conceived colonial decisions, broken promises made to various groups, the imposition of artificial borders that disregarded existing social and ethnic realities, and a government founded on violence and exclusion haunted Iraq for decades to come, shaping its trajectory in profound and tragic ways. The seeds of future conflict, sown in the 1920s, would eventually sprout into a harvest of instability and suffering. Ultimately, Iraq's troubled birth irrevocably shaped its destiny, setting the stage for the challenges and conflicts that would define its history. In response to colonial division, pan-Arabism emerged, a dream of a unified Arab nation. Arabs shared language, culture, and history and saw their fragmentation as an unnatural foreign imposition. Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt became the movement's charismatic leader, inspiring millions with calls for dignity and independence. Nasser's nationalization of the Suez Canal and defiance of Western powers made him a hero. The high point came in 1958 when Egypt and Syria formed the United Arab Republic, celebrated across the region. But the union quickly collapsed, revealing deep divisions and rival ambitions. Pan-Arabism was built on rhetoric more than practical plans, and leaders were unwilling to surrender sovereignty. The movement failed to overcome the region's divisions. Its decline left an ideological vacuum soon filled by more radical and divisive forces. The dream of unity faded, replaced by new struggles. Pan-Arabism's brief flame could not withstand the realities of power and identity. The region remained fractured. The hope for unity gave way to new forms of conflict. As European empires retreated, the US and Soviet Union turned the Middle East into a Cold War battleground. The region's oil and strategic location made it vital to both superpowers. The Soviets backed radical Arab states like Egypt, Syria, and Iraq, supplying arms and advisors. The US allied with conservative monarchies and Israel, fueling an arms race. Local leaders played the superpowers against each other, securing aid and building security states. Authoritarian regimes flourished, suppressing dissent and stifling democracy. The Arab-Israeli wars and civil conflicts became proxy wars for global rivals. The Cold War deepened divisions, militarized societies, and entrenched dictatorships. When it ended, the region was left with autocrats, weapons, and scars from decades of conflict. The superpower rivalry made every problem worse. The legacy of the Cold War still shapes the Middle East. In 1948, the British Mandate ended and Israel declared independence. For Jews, it was the fulfillment of an ancient dream. For Palestinian Arabs, it was the Nakba, the catastrophe. War erupted as Arab states invaded, but Israel survived and expanded its territory. Over 700,000 Palestinians fled or were expelled, becoming permanent refugees. Their return never came, and their plight became a symbol of unresolved injustice. The creation of Israel and the displacement of Palestinians fueled wars and shaped the region's politics. The conflict became the central rallying cry in the Arab world. It gave birth to the Palestinian nationalist movement and decades of struggle. The wound of 1948 has never healed, echoing through every decade. The quest for peace remains elusive. After independence, hopes for democracy in the Middle East faded. Military strongmen and monarchs replaced fragile parliaments. In Syria, Iraq, and Egypt, leaders like Assad, Saddam, and Nasser ruled through force. These regimes promised stability but delivered tyranny, building vast security states. Dissent was crushed. Opponents were arrested, tortured, or disappeared. Emergency laws and conflict with Israel justified repression. Nationalism and anti-imperialism became tools to silence reform. Societies became brittle, opposition radicalized, and institutions hollowed out. Economies served elites while the masses struggled. The system, designed for stability, created conditions for explosive uprisings. Decades of repression set the stage for future chaos. The dream of democracy was buried under dictatorship. Warren? As dictatorships suppressed dissent, sectarianism re-emerged with deadly force. In Iraq and Syria, ruling minorities dominated majorities, intertwining state power with religious identity. Lebanon's civil war showed how sectarian conflict could destroy a society. Regional powers like Iran and Saudi Arabia fueled sectarian proxy wars, turning local grievances into existential struggles. The weaponization of religious identity turned neighbors into enemies. In Iraq and Syria, state collapse unleashed horrific sectarian violence. Sectarianism remains a deep source of chaos, making reconciliation nearly impossible. The late 20th century saw new forces challenge the old order. The 1979 Iranian Revolution toppled the Shah and created an Islamic republic, inspiring movements across the region. Iran exported its revolutionary ideology, supporting groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon. In Palestine, the First Intifada and the rise of Hamas shifted the struggle against Israel. These groups often rivaled national governments in power and influence. The end of the Cold War brought new foreign interventions, most notably the 2003 US invasion of Iraq. Toppling Saddam Hussein unleashed chaos, insurgency, and sectarian war, giving rise to groups like ISIS. Foreign interventions shattered societies and unleashed uncontrollable forces. Old grievances mixed with new conflicts fueled by revolution and invasion. States within states emerged, challenging national authority. The region's chaos deepened. Layered with revolution, resistance, and foreign meddling, the struggle for control became ever more complex. The modern Middle East is a story of tragedy, division, and endless conflict. Colonial borders, failed dreams of unity, and superpower games left scars that still shape the region. Cities lie in ruins, refugees live in limbo, and walls divide peoples. Proxy wars and sectarian strife seem unending, yet amid the chaos there is resilience. The Arab Spring showed a powerful desire for dignity and freedom. Millions risked everything to demand change, even as hopes were crushed. The region is not just a story of despair, it is also one of creativity and hope. Doctors rebuild clinics, activists document abuses, artists refuse silence, and families persevere. The struggle between destruction and creation continues. The path out of chaos is uncertain, but the resilience of its people endures. The Middle East is more than its conflicts. Its people's hope is a fragile light in a long, dark night. The story is not over,